Terima kasih pengacara majlis Encik Jayata Koma, Yang Berusaha Puan Latifah Jokoya, Ketua Pengarah Suruhanjaya Pencegahan Rasuah Malaysia, Yang Berbahagia Datuk Saya Dr. Akmal Hassan, Ketua Pengarah Jabatan Pembangunan Wanita, Perwakilan Antarabangsa dan Negara-Negara Apec, Pegawai Perikklanan Kerajaan, Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Datuk-Datuk dan Tin-Tin rakan-rakan media, Tuan-tuan, puan-puan yang dihormati sekalian, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan salam sejahtera. A very good morning to everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your in the course of preparing for today, I struggled to balance the areas which I should deliberate on this morning. Having been in active politics not by design but by default, for the last 2 decades, I have witnessed and experienced a whole discourse of women and the need for our empowerment to fight corrupt regimes and practices. In this regard, I must remind myself that we've been through quite a lot, and with Puan Latifah being my husband's lawyer for some time when we faced trouble. This said, the role of women in fighting corruption is often a muted subject, not much discussed or promoted such. The reasons for this are many, some of which I will go through today, but the deeper question that needs to be asked is that, have we done enough to ensure women from all walks of lives have the ability to be at the forefront and center in our societies to fight corruption? From the corridors of power to boardrooms, from kitchen tables to classrooms, from factories to vendors, big and small, women in all spheres and stratum of our societies must be agents of change and agents of beating corruption. On that note, allow me to first thank the Anti-Corruption and Transparency Experts Working Group, the ACTWG, for inviting me to this symposium, through its chair, Ms. Latifah Koya, who is also the Chief Commissioner of the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, MACC. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on 16th October 2017, Daphne Ann Caruana Galizia, a Maltese journalist, died close to her home when a car bomb was detonated inside her vehicle. Daphne focused on investigative journalism, reporting on government corruption, nepotism, patronage, and allegations of money laundering. In 2016, Daphne broke a story about a string of secret Panama-based companies tied to Maltese politicians on her blog. Her work laid the foundation for the publication first of the Paradise Papers and later the Panama Papers by International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Her family are convinced she was murdered for her bravery and her exposure. In 2006, when Elaine Fleshman began working at JP Chase, she noticed that the bank was purchasing loans it knew people could not pay back. This is called mortgage-backed securities, investment products made out of home mortgages that were bundled and resold. When she raised it with her boss, she was told to stop all communication with him. Elaine went to the federal prosecutors and gave them evidence of the mortgage securities wrongdoing. JP Chase paid a $9 billion fine. This case has been described as one of the most significant white-collar crime cases in the US history. In 2002, Cynthia Cooper, an American accountant who formerly served as the vice president of internal audit at WorldCom, and her team of auditors worked together often at night and in secret to investigate and unearth a $3.8 billion worth fraud at WorldCom. At that time, this was the largest incident of accounting fraud in US history. From accounting fraud to graft, to plain daylight corruption, It simply takes you and I, no matter the ranks that we serve in our jobs, to highlight cases of non-alignments and misdemeanors. The challenge for us all in this room and in our societies is to build an ecosystem that simply does not condone or tolerate any form of graft or corruption. With this in mind, I'd like to deliberate on the following three areas today. First, to present the devastating impact of corruption on women. Second, on how women can play an active role in fighting corruption in societies. And third, Apec's role to boost women's empowerment in fighting corruption. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany, in an interview once spoke of her own personal experience as a female politician, and she said, "It is no problem at all for a man to walk and wear a dark blue suit 100 days in a row. But if I wear the same blazer 4 times within 2 weeks, letters start pouring in." Gender biases and parity exist in labor forces all over the world from time immemorial, ranging from over 10% in the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development Economies, to 50% in the Middle East and North Africa. Globally, women tend to be locked out of leadership positions, where gender seems to matter more than ability. Women make up 5% only of Fortune 500 CEOs. The World Economic Forum shows that countries with greater gender equality are those countries that have established strong democratic institutions. Hence, countries that have greater freedom and established democracy and support gender equality show better results in corruption indices. The core values of democracy and gender equality are therefore fundamental in reducing corruption. Globally, over 2.7 billion women are legally restricted from having the same choice of jobs as men. This is real and not a myth. Of the 189 economies assessed in 2018, 104 economies still have laws preventing women from working in specific jobs. 59 economies have no laws on sexual harassment in the workplace, and in 18 countries, husbands can legally prevent their wives from working. The labor force participation rate for women aged between 25 and 54 is 63% compared to 94% of men. In 2017, global unemployment rates for men and women stood at 5.5% and 6.2%, respectively, and these numbers are projected to remain relatively unchanged through to 2021. Women are often overrepresented in insecure, informal, and vulnerable employment, and even though women are more than twice as likely as men to be contributing family workers. As primary caretakers of homes and communities, women can experience corruption in many forms. A woman's definition and experience of corruption may be different to what many of us know, and that definition may differ in societies they reside. It can come in the form of payments required to enroll their children in certain schools, participating in programs by the government, participating in electoral processes, denouncing physical and sexual abuse at home and or at work, and in areas of law enforcement. Women generally interface with public agencies for 2 reasons: to access basic services for themselves and their families, and or to access services which have a significant impact on their quality of life. It is at these points where they may face corruption. Women also experience corruption when seeking employment and when running businesses in both the formal and informal sectors of the economy. They face roadblocks when obtaining documentation on proof of identity and residence such as birth, death, marriage certificates, and passports. In many societies, women still have issues assessing this information. When there is corruption in getting basic access to documentation on self-verification, women are invariably impeded from accessing other forms of services and opportunities. One other area often quoted as a consistent point of corruption is from enforcement bodies. Law enforcement officials demand bribes in multiple facets of women's day-to-day lives because women are often seen as the weaker gender. In some communities, women continue to face extortion when only exercising their land and property rights during transactions. Corruption also exists when women try to participate in elections and politics, when votes can be bought in exchange for money or gifts. Let me also state that women can also be the one who is corrupt, and maybe the one who is offering or giving bribes for something in return. This is why integrity is of the utmost importance and should be an integral part of every person, man or woman. This is something that the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission constantly emphasizes on, and what we as individuals must instill in ourselves and our families. Most of you are maybe familiar with the infamous 1MDB scandal that plagued our nation during the previous regime. Under the new Pakatan Harapan government, we are committed to eradicate corruption, and I'm proud to say that we have yielded some results. Malaysia's ranking in the Corruption Perception Index, CPI 2019, jumped 10 places to 51 compared to the previous year. We scored 53 points compared to 47 points in the 2018 index. Anything above 3 points is considered a significant improvement. In Malaysia, we are also reforming our electoral system, and one key improvement we have introduced is to allow all men and women above 18 years of age to register and vote, and this legislation has been passed. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the first panacea to fighting any form of corruption is in building an ecosystem of the public's rights and access to information, freedom of speech, legal protection, existence of mechanisms to report corruption, register grievances, and the existence of anti-corruption laws, to name but a few. In this context, we need to first identify where there are a lack of proper anti-corruption laws and/or infrastructure, and/or lack of sufficient public awareness of existing laws and measures to address corruption faced by women, as I just briefly highlighted above. While there are several commendable efforts to strengthen legal and institutional frameworks for accountable and transparent governments, some of these efforts may not have the depth and the bandwidth to reach the regional, state, and local decision-making structures and institutions due to lack of women participation. Education, I would argue, is the key to building an ecosystem that does not tolerate corruption. Unfortunately, there was a survey done, and sometimes the children or the people, the young people in higher education thought that it was all right to receive a bribe. We have a lot of work to do when this is what they think about and they think it is right. So what is crucial is the context and content of this advocacy programs, and how we customize this for the various stratum of our women in our societies. It must also include building capacity. Capacity building through awareness programs about the different impact of bribery on women's everyday lives by using all available mediums. Customizing the messages to suit the audience is usually significant. One size does not fit all. In addition to education, understanding the rights and existence of laws is central in fighting corruption. This can be done through establishing support networks. I would like to urge all of us to involve grassroots women in national anti-corruption programs and policy development that would greatly benefit from invaluable real-life experiences. As policy and lawmakers, we often miss this point and develop programs in the absence of their input, and then find these programs to be obsolete and ineffective. We could also establish monitoring and audit tools through a variety of mechanisms which are gender sensitive. Establishment of clear lines of whistleblowing and safe spaces for women to report corruption with clear channels for redressing incidents is central to this effort and initiative. Further, a free, responsible, and independent press must be allowed to investigate, report, and publish on corruption. Malaysia has made positive strides in our press freedom, and we are in the midst of drafting a bill for the formation of a National Media Council to further strengthen the integrity and independence of our media. The committee in charge of this is made up of media players and stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, a misnomer we must address is having women in senior and management positions is not a true reflection of the tapestry of their involvement in our economy. The World Economic Forum's latest report has revealed that Malaysia has one of the biggest gender gaps in Southeast Asia. We rank 9th in the region, although we are still higher than other Asian countries such as South Korea, China, and Japan. Admittedly, we need to improve in political and business empowerment for women at all levels. The government is fully cognizant of this, and we are working together towards at least 30% political representation in the state and federal government as per our GE manifesto, or GE 14 manifesto. This said, the proportion of women in federal parliament has improved from 10.8% in the previous election in 2013 to 14.9% currently. As of 2019, there are 33 women in the federal government, in parliament, 5 female ministers, and 4 female deputy ministers. Our roles as lawmakers and executives is to drive a more female, pro-family approaches and policies. Much of the research since the financial crisis of 2008 showed that if banks and financial advisors, supervisors increased the share of women in senior positions, the banking sector would be more stable. According to an IMF study entitled Women in Finance, an Economic Case for Gender Equality, companies where women are most strongly represented at board and top management levels are also those companies that perform best. In Malaysia, I'm proud to share that we have 3 exemplary women whistleblowers from the Auditor General's office. They include the former Auditor General herself, Tan Sri Dr. Madina Muhammad, former Audit Performance Director, Ms. Sadatul Nafisa, and Audit Director Dato Nur Salwani Muhammad, who whistleblowed or gave the evidence on the alleged tampering of the 2016 final audit report on One Malaysia Development Berhad, which is 1MDB. These women are key witnesses for the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission on a case that is being heard in our courts currently. Ladies and gentlemen, Madame Christine Lagarde, the former IMF Managing Director and now President of the European Central Bank, said what we have observed is that when there are more women, the bank's capital buffers are larger, the number of non-performing loans is smaller, and the risk indices are lower. It is a causality and not just a strong correlation. Research on the role of women in fighting corruption still needs a lot more work. We need to step up our efforts to have accountable systems that will not only empower women at all levels, but create the structures to fight corruption effectively both in the public and private sectors. Changing laws and institutions alone there cannot fix everything. We need the right attitudes to move away from a male-dominated and a boys' club culture to one that looks at contribution regardless of gender. The tone from the top is absolutely key when fighting corruption. The government is committed to fighting corruption of all nature, and the first initiative was launched by our Prime Minister, to Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, post-GE14, was the establishment of the GIACC, which is National Centre for Governance, Integrity and Anti-Corruption, to assist the government in developing its strategies and policies to effectively fight corruption. On the 29th of January 2019, we launched the National Anti-Corruption Plan, which comprises 115 initiatives to fight corruption across all strata of society. In addition to these initiatives, this government has appointed a woman to lead the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission. As you can all see, a very capable Ms. Latifah Koya, leading our fight against corruption. At the Apec level, we could advocate for the inclusion of more grassroots women leaders in drafting committees of anti-corruption treaties and national legislation. We would also encourage international peer exchanges between women groups to enable cross-fertilization and capacity building. I would argue for us to have an effective plan to fight corruption faced by women, we need an intensive bottom-up approach of engaging women from various strata of societies. Engage in community mapping in order to generate and analyze information on the causes of corruption and ways of addressing it in public agencies. I cannot end today without delving on the invaluable hand that rocks the cradle. The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. As mothers, daughters, sisters, wives, mothers and daughters-in-law, granddaughters, aunties and nieces, we must do our part in nurturing our families with a value system that abhors corruption of all kinds. It is at these levels of the family unit that we have each other, that we each have the ultimate responsibility to inculcate a system of good governance. Good governance starts with a good value system, and every one of us has a moral duty as a human being to set wrongs in our spheres of responsibilities right. Fighting corruption does not have to involve grander schemes. The most effective scheme involves building family units that are morally sound. This is where each and every one of us in this room can discharge our duties, not just to our societies and countries, but mostly to our own souls. The women who have made history in whistleblowing sacrificed their lives and reputations. They sacrificed all they worked for and their own livelihoods. I pray for an environment where this is no longer required, that courage will prevail and truth will be seen as the truth, and we fight for the right and justice for all. And that we know not to take what is not ours, and that impunity is eradicated from our societies, ourselves first, and our societies. Rigoberta Menchú, Nobel Prize laureate, said, "Without strong watchdog institutions, impunity becomes the very foundation upon which systems of corruption are built. And if impunity is not demolished, all efforts to bring an end to corruption are in vain." So, before I end, I just want to tell you that one of the quotes that I always remember about temptation is that what Oscar Wilde said, "I can resist anything but temptation." So we are all tempted. We will be tempted at one time or other in our lives. There's a choice that we have to make. And that little moral compass that we have inside us will guide us. That is why it's so important to strengthen that and have that resilience and that ability to say no. This is most important. You can go for hours and hours on a lot of things, but the most important thing is your integrity, honesty, and your strength, resilience. So we must resist temptation. On that note, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my special thanks to the APEC Secretariat and APEC Policy Partnership on Women and Economy for providing the necessary support and assistance which enabled ACTWG Malaysia to host this symposium for the benefit of all, inshallah. I thank you for your patience. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.